Everyone, Jason here from spiritualbabies.net. We are back in our current series, which is on Hosea, and we are entering chapter 10. I'm going to jump straight in. We're joined, as always, by Rabbi Joshua Neely. You can have a look at his other programs here. There's a link, and at the end of the video, there'll be a option to subscribe to his channel, which you totally should do. There's lots of good stuff. Okay, so we are looking in chapter 10, verse 1. Israel is a vine devoid of fruit fitting for it. When I increased their good, they increased for the altars. And when I increased their land, they increased pillars. So I know that pillars is a sign of pagan worship.
Right.
And obviously altars too. And fruit and vine are two very biblical words that describe the thing and the fruit of the thing.
Right. So the second half of that first phrase is a little, what's the right word? It's a little linguistically ambiguous. Mm-hmm. So you can either say that the vine is gone, and the fruit is like it too, meaning that the fruit is also gone.
Okay.
Or you can say that the fruit is like it, meaning that the fruit is also devoid of any goodness. And that may be both a description of the current bounty of the land, or it may be a generational description, meaning that those that come from the vine are just like the parents.
Oh, very good. Okay. And as any increase they do get happens, they're putting all of that potential into foreign gods and going off and doing their own thing.
Which was exactly what was predicted in the Torah. Exactly.
Right. Their heart has parted, now they shall be desolate. That shall diminish their altars and plunder their pillars.
The Hebrew word that's being used there is halak, which I guess can mean depart in a certain way, but it also can mean broken or divided,
Okay.
rendered into pieces. So it could mean that their heart is gone, meaning that they've lost something. But again, remember, heart doesn't always mean emotion or love. A heart can mean intelligence and wisdom at the same time in biblical poetry. Given the rest of the verse, I would say that it's sort of like they are forlorn and feeling in ruin, just like their altars, which have also been pulled and smashed.
Now they shall say, we have no king, for we did not fear the Lord. Now what shall a king do for us? I know that mostly when you read through the text, it seems that Israel is screaming for a king all of the time.
Well, so that's the problem is, where do we go now? What we had wanted, which was either our false gods or our king that we chose to lead us and protect us, have all been destroyed and taken away. And they're kind of sort of admitting that it's because they weren't connected to God properly. But now the question comes up, so what do we do now? Do we... what could a king do for us? And then we're going to see their answers come in verses 4, 5, and onward.
They spoke words, swearing falsely, forming a covenant, and judgment shall spring up like hemlock on the furrows of the field. Hemlock being poison.
Right.
And is this a kind of admonition for their begging after God to fix all the stuff that they've done wrong? And we won't. There's no atheists in a foxhole, I think the phrase goes. So they're in a position where they realize that God's the only one that can do it, and God comes and he helps a little bit, and then they just go and break all their promises anyway.
So possibly. So there's two ways to read this, right? So one is to say that their agreements and their covenants that they're making, the brit that they're talking about here, is being made with God. And that they are swearing falsely, saying, "Oh, this time we mean it, God. We'll be good." Personally, I think that doesn't work quite as well with the rest of the verse, talking about the poison in the fields and all of that. It could work, but maybe not. The other way to read it is that they are making agreements and covenants with false oaths with other powers, right? Those countries that are weakened. One of the first things they do, rather than examining why they themselves have brought this upon themselves, is to look for allies. And we know that was an on-running theme with Hosea, as well as most of the prophets, that the people were looking for allies among the Egyptians or uh, the, the Assyrians and others to bolster their abilities, and that would then be planting the poison that's going to come. You think you're making these deals and you think you're being so clever because you're really just going to use these other allies for a short time and then you're not going to need them anymore. But really what you're doing is you're planting poison in your midst.
The next verse is verse 5. Because of the calves of Beth Aven, the neighbors in Samaria shall be frightened, for its people shall mourn over it, and its priests would rejoice over it, because of its glory, for it has been exiled from it. Now, there's a lot of its in that. But can you break that down? And when this is calves, are they talking about sacrifices?
No, they're talking here about the idolatrous calves that were made up in the north to give people the focus to worship, because they didn't want them going to Jerusalem.
I see.
That whole, you don't want to export your spirituality to your neighbor to the south, and so you replace it. But of course, in this case, you're replacing it with an idol, which is not a good thing for the Jewish state to be doing.
So it says the neighbors in Samaria should be frightened of it. Should be frightened. They're frightened of what's coming to Beth Aven.
So yeah, here we get some more translation difficulties. This is the fun of poetry, and if you think that this is tricky, and maybe that means the poet wasn't so good, you're missing the point. Poets that are able to write things that have multiple layers of meaning that require you to dig, those are poets who are doing a good job. And if you read any good poetry in English, you might also try to consider, how would I write that poem in a different language and still capture all of its essence? So that's part of what's going on here. So every time I keep saying, well, it's difficult, that's not a problem. That means we've got more room for more understanding than if it were clear. So the idea here could be that they are fearful because of those calves, meaning that they have been brought to ruin because of them, or they could be fearful about them. That is to say, they're worried about losing them, that they will be taken away, and that these things that they rejoiced over and that were their glory, they will be taken from them, because taking these golden statues would have been the first prize booty. And verse 6, I think, really kind of backs that up.
So on to 6. That too shall be carried off to Assyria, a gift to the king Yareb. I'm assuming. Yareb. Ephraim shall take shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of his, the king's maybe, counsel. Or Ephraim. You're going to have to break that down, actually. I wish they'd color code.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Wouldn't it help? Right, so likely what's talking here, and this is where we can be getting sort of the mirror, which does lend the other possibility, right, which is that the people have been exiled from the calf, or the calf has been exiled from the people, but in either way, in verse 6, it is being brought to Assyria as tribute, and or as a gift, whichever way you want to put the word mincha, and the idea being here that everything that was their wealth and their glory is ending up in the hands of Assyria. And many will actually read Lamelech Yarev as being a shortened version of the word Sennacherib, which was the Assyrian conqueror who destroyed the northern kingdom. So Yarev is basically part of his name, the last part of his name, in a particular way of reading it. So the idea being that the entire nation has now been fully humiliated by the Assyrian war machine. Those that they had looked to, if you remember, as being possible allies.
And Ephraim is going to be embarrassed of his actions. I saw in the notes earlier that one of those actions may have been that he erected one of these calves.
Definitely. But embarrassed is not even really strong enough. I mean, veyevosh is like humiliated, ashamed. It's not like oops kind of embarrassment. I mean, it's full on, shame. 7.
The king of Samaria is silenced and is like foam on the surface of the water. I think that's called jetsam. There we go. The high places of Aven are destroyed, the sin of Israel, thorns and thistles should come up on their altars, and they shall say to the mountains, cover us up, and its hills fall upon us.
So I think the idea is that the shrines, their altars, are that were the sin of Israel. That that's like in the relative clause thing, that their thorns and thistles will grow over them, and the altars themselves, it's as though they are calling out to the mountains, take us back, bury us, hide us from the world, and to the hills, collapse upon us, obliterate us, we the shrines, forevermore.
Since the days of Gibeah,
Gibeah, right?
Gibeah, thank you. Since the days of Gibeah, you have sinned, O Israel. There they remain. The battle against the haughty did not overtake them in Gibeah. Now, do we have a past history of Gibeah?
Gibeah here, what they're referring to, probably, is the story that comes in the book of Judges.
Okay.
And if you don't remember the story, as we just talked about making a graphic novel, this would be one that would not be in the kids' version of the Bible, because this is the one where the concubine was taken and brutally abused until she died, and then her partner cut her into pieces and sent them to all the tribes and said, look at how bad the Benjamites were.
Wow.
It's a really, really rough section to read. And there's just no winners, which is partly the point of that story, that the entire society had fallen apart, that even people who thought they were doing right ended up doing such horrible things. And the idea here in verse 9 is that what Israel is doing is worse than what was going on in the days of Gibeah. It's kind of like using that as a benchmark of horrible behavior and saying, you guys are even worse.
10. With my will I will chastise them. The nations shall gather about them, and they will bind them to their two eyes. It says in the notes here, according to my will, I have chastised them from judge to judge, and I will deliver them into the hands of their plunderers. Maybe you can help me understand what that line means. When they say from judge to judge, is judge another word from prophet for prophet?
Not exactly. And the translation you're reading is very different than the one I've got in front of me, and very different than what, because the word for judge usually is shofet, which is not appearing in this verse at all.
No, sorry. This was a note I had for that text.
Okay.
It was breaking down with my will I will chastise them.
Okay.
Because the note mentions that it will chastise them from judge to judge, and I will deliver them unto the hand of their plunderers. I think it's Rashi.
Okay, yeah. Now I'm looking on the Rashi on the right. Again, thank you, Safaria, for making the so easy to look up commentary. And yeah, that's a direct quote from Rashi. And there he is using the word shofet, which means judges, which means the rulers of the different tribal periods of Israel.
Okay. Just because it says, with my will I chastise them, but I'm wondering what in this instance my will is. Is it just that they come across hard times? Is it that they put a prophet in there? He puts a prophet in there and says, behave yourselves or this will happen?
Well, it's, according to my will, according to my will rather than with my will. It means that is what God wants to happen. God wants the people to be chastised, and so that they will turn from what they've been doing.
The nations shall gather around them. Doesn't sound like a positive thing. I don't think they're gathering around them to protect them from.
Yeah, that's usually not a good thing. Yes.
And is there anything else when they bind them to their two eyes? That's such an odd. See, you can have two eyes, as in two needles would have two eyes. Is there something else going on here other than just it being physical eyes?
Well, the traditional interpretation, which follows the direction that it's headed by verse 11, is to say that these are the two eyes of the yokes that will be used on the oxen.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of referencing holes rather than physical eyes. And so the yokes indicate slavery. Is that where it's going?
Well, actually, the yoke is always a positive image in Judaism, where the yoke means that you are following God's directions. just like a dumb beast when he's in a yoke will do amazing things. So to Israel, when they are allowing themselves to be yoked by God, will pull the right direction and do good things. And that's kind of what is going to be referenced in the next couple verses, this idea of what good could come from doing what God has asked us to do.
Now that Torah passage about not yoking an ox with a nass or something, that makes much more sense. I mean, it made farming sense anyway, but now with that little extra cherry on top, that's good. Okay, 11. And Ephraim is a goaded heifer that loves to thresh, and I passed over her fair neck. I will cause Ephraim to ride, Judah shall plow, Jacob shall break his clods.
You got to love farming metaphors because they're so relevant to so many of us these days. But we have this idea that Ephraim generally has not been very well trained, right? So goaded here, milumada, it comes from the same Hebrew word as teach. Or rather, I should say, teach comes from the same Hebrew word as to prod the animal in the right direction, which is an interesting little insight into how you teach someone. You're prodding the animal person into being a real person. But what's being described is that this Ephraim cow was not so well trained. It was becoming well trained. It used to like to thresh, but now it will even plow. And what's being described here is this preference of animals. If you had a choice between threshing, where you get to eat some, and plowing, where you're just walking through dirt and pulling a lot more weight behind you with that plow digging through the ground, which would you rather do? Right? Do you want to eat or do you want to plow? I think I'd pick eating. Yes. And what God is saying here is that Ephraim was much more of a thresher, but with the yoke became a plower, and that's a good thing. And Judah too, can be made to plow. And then verse 12 is going to say what the benefits are of plowing properly in the way that God has directed us. And then it's all going to fall apart again after that.
So when you talk about the ploughing part of that verse, is that and I passed over her fair neck? Is that where that's coming from?
Yeah, exactly. That's the yoke comes onto the neck, and now it's ready to plow. Right. That's Ephraim being taken in to be made useful again, rather than this rebellious, horrible nation that it is. And then, boom, it's got the ability to plow.
Just pinning it down. Okay, and on to 12. Sow righteousness for yourselves, reap according to loving kindness. Loving kindness is I'd say that's the main phrase that pops up over and over and over. I think it's been in nearly every chapter we've tackled.
The word, chesed. It's a beautiful word.
Reap according to loving kindness. Plow yourselves a plowing, and it is time to seek the Lord until He comes and instructs you in righteousness. So they've used the picture from the verse before, and the prophet's taken that verse and then orchestrated it directly to each person, so they can say they have an ability to go out now and be the good cow and the good plower, and rather than just doing it for feeding themselves, they can be doing it for the greater good.
Well, and the funny thing is, being a good plower means you end up eating much more than just being a good thresher, right? Because there is no threshing without plowing. And if you sow righteousness, if you live this way, then you'll reap chesed, you'll reap goodness, and you will reap all the benefits that God has given. And that is what we should be doing, is seeking God, plowing the earth, doing good, and we will reap those rewards. Unfortunately, that is not really the kind of plowing that we normally do. And that's really where verse 13 kicks in again.
Before verse 13, I have to go back to until He comes and instructs you in righteousness. How is that generally represented? I mean, on the one hand, they have the Torah, And on the other hand, they have prophets that will come when they kind of veer off the track. So, who is the he? And how will he instruct you in righteousness? Does some people look at this as kind of a messianic text?
So, I mean, this is one of those texts that could go in multiple ways, right? So the idea is that we should be seeking God, right? The phrase here is lidrosh, which is the word that comes from drash, or the word drash comes from, word midrash comes from. This is to inquire, to ask of, to demand information and answers from God, and we do that until we have reached a level where we are fully righteous, where we fully understand. So that is both a metaphor for teaching and learning. It is also a metaphor for the ultimate teacher, the Mashiach, who will provide the final answers to whatever it is we're missing on our own. So it really works on both levels in this verse.
Okay, fair enough. Couldn't let it go. Okay, 13. You have plowed wickedness, you have reaped injustice, you have eaten fruit of lies, you have relied on your way and the abundance of your mighty men. That's I think that's a fair summation of of everything that's happened so far.
And Jen, again, to point out the beautiful parallelism of between verses 12 and 13, where we were told to sow righteous and reap chesed, reap this loving kindness, but instead we have sown evil and we have reaped the sins, and now we are eating the fruits of all of that horribleness because we went after our own way, and we trusted our future to having a mighty army rather than having a mighty soul.
And a tumult shall rise in your people, and all your fortresses shall be plundered, as the plunder of a peaceful people by an ambush on a day of war. The mother with the children, children was dashed to pieces. So this kind of gives the impression of that everything's going to be taken from them, and they'll just stand there and have it happen to them. There's nothing they can do.
Right. I mean, and that is ultimately what did happen. For all the glory and the wealth and greatness of the northern kingdom, by the Arameans, but then they fought back, and then by the Assyrians, they fell, and they fell hard, and really were ultimately devastated in ways that were just exceedingly tragic. I mean, the idea of mothers and children being smashed, it's just a hint at the horrors that they went through.
So has Bethel done to you because of the evil of your wickedness. At dawn, the king of Israel has been silenced. So this is the last line, but it doesn't feel like it should be the last line. It feels like it should continue. So has Bethel done to you because of the evil of your wickedness. At dawn, the king of Israel has been silenced.
Right, well, the so has, the kacha, that begins verse 15, is referring to everything above. Right, and Bethel again is being used as a stand-in for the site of the worship of the golden calves that they had in the north. So it's basically saying, this is what your betrayal of God, what your idolatry has led you to. Everything that you have just heard, that is the ultimate outcome of your behavior.
And the dawn part, is that it's analogy, right? It just means the beginning, or the first thing that happens. It's like first thing tomorrow, as opposed to an act. I mean, he didn't come out and say all this stuff, and then they all set their watches. It's talking more about the beginning of a new
right. Yeah,
era.
It's not a at 6 a.m. statement.
Sure.
It's yes.
The king of Israel has been silenced, meaning that they don't even bother looking. Don't even bother looking for a king of Israel to save you here, because it's not going to happen. You have a king, and you're the king of the universe. You messed up. Don't be looking for a king of Israel. Is that where that's going with
right?
This?
And the silence of the king of Israel is also referring to his disappearance, that he will be gone, destroyed, dead. the line of the northern king was totally wiped out, and so there's only the line of the southern king, of the line of David. And another possible interpretation of this, at dawn the king will be silent, is sort of based off speculation of behavior in the ancient world, where at dawn, the king, the trumpets would blare, the proclamations would go forth, and people knew the king was there, the king was strong, the king was ready to defend the people. And instead, this war is going to grip them, and rather than the king rising, it's just going to be silence. There is no defense coming to this northern kingdom.
Very good. I know that when we go into the next chapter, it's kind of a change of pace. That's going to be fun.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Chapter 10 is pretty heavy.
Yeah, it is. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this at home. If you have questions about this or any of the previous shows or any stuff in the future, please leave them in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. Thank you very much, Rabbi Neely, for giving us your time and knowledge again.
Thank you, Jason.
It's been a complete pleasure. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.